Hi everyone, I haven't posted in a while, really long while actually, but it's 2020, I'm back at it. As of today, I'm officially an advanced and instrument ground instructor. Very excited to share that and be able to talk about some things as an instructor. I'm also a CFI candidate. I've taken my written exam. I recently did my spin training and got my endorsement up in Long Beach. And right now I am working through all the lesson plans trying to prepare for the Checkride, which I hope to accomplish by the end of the year. I thought it might be a beneficial exercise for me and also for some of you to put together a private pilot quiz. This quiz is for anyone that's preparing for a private pilot Checkride. It's not comprehensive, it's certainly limited. But it is a gauge to see where you're at and possibly pinpoint some areas that need review. Some of these are super basic, like parts of an acronym. In aviation, there are a ton of acronyms. But if you don't know what something stands for, that might be a little indication that you need to review it. I'm going to post a PDF. I actually already have posted it on my website, which is writingbyvalerie.com. Click on blog and the aviation category and you will find it. So now we'll go ahead and get started. I'll go over some things. If you have questions, certainly share them in the comments. I get an email when there's a comment and I will reply when I can. And I'm always happy to hear your feedback as well or anything you might like a video about. If this video is helpful, you can like it and subscribe to my channel. Both of those things are super helpful to anyone that's posting content on YouTube. Okay, let's get started. The four forces of flight are lift, weight, thrust, and drag. This is basic Aerodynamics 101. If you want to read up on this, go to Encyclopedia Britannica, look up Sir George Cayley, the English engineer. Start there. Lots of info on aerodynamics. You don't need to know everything, but a basic grasp of this is important. An ordinary aircraft altimeter is nothing more than a sensitive barometer, an instrument that measures air pressure. Our altimeters in our trainer aircraft measure distance above sea level in feet. You may hear the Colesman window, the barber pole. This is like 1930s technology, but we still use it today. The airspeed indicator compares ram air pressure and static air pressure. So the airspeed indicator is a scale that measures the difference between the static pressure from your static ports, which are along here, and then the ram pressure, the dynamic and static pressure that comes through the pitot tube right here. The O in the Aero Checklist refers to operating limitations. This is your POH, your AFM, your 8130-7's Special Airworthiness Certificate. Regarding the fuel requirements for flight in VFR conditions, you may not begin a flight in an airplane under VFR conditions unless there is enough fuel to fly to the point of intended landing and then during the day to fly for at least 30 minutes or at night to fly for at least 45 minutes. 14 CFR 91-151. This is just a reg you need to be familiar with. Aircraft registration expires 3 years after an aircraft was registered or last renewed. If you're going to be flying a plane you haven't flown before or you've never seen before, you can kind of look ahead to see when it was last registered. You'll still need to verify it's in the aircraft. I use FlightAware, so just click on the tail number and see when the registration expires. And then when you get to the aircraft, obviously make sure it's also in there. Regarding the night currency requirements to carry passengers at night, you need at least 3 night takeoffs and landings to a full stop within the preceding 90 days. Again, another reg that you need to know. You don't need to know the section number, but if your examiner asks you about night currency, 3 takeoff and landings to a full stop. The 2 kind of follow-up questions would be, can you do touch and goes? No, full stop. And then what time? It's got to be an hour after sunset and an hour before sunrise that you've done those 3 takeoff and landings. The Pave Checklist is a great way to evaluate your personal minimums and hazards you could experience when flying. Per FAR 91209A1, you need to use position lights or nav lights from sunset to sunrise. Okay, just a quick note here. Your night currency is an hour after sunset to an hour before sunrise, but this is totally different than your nav lights. You got to use those from sunset to sunrise. So just look for little points of confusion. The DPE is not supposed to trick you, but he's going to want to make sure that you know it. He or she will want to make sure you know it. The M in the I'm Safe checklist stands for medicine. This is a basic checklist that you check in with yourself to see if you're fit to fly. The medicine, of course, refers to anything illegal, sure, like you can't take a Ambien or Sonata and then go fly. But it also means to check on over-the-counter medications that may make you unsafe. Like if you were stung by a bee earlier in the day and you took a few Benadryls, that could make you super sleepy. So not something that you would necessarily want to go fly after you take, or that would be safe. VOR stands for VHS Omnidirectional Radio Range. I could do a long video on what a VOR is, but in the most basic terms, it's a directional aid. You have a rotating directional signal that is broadcast from the VOR, while a second signal is broadcast only when the rotating signal passes north, and then your airplane has a receiver which measures the time difference between these two signals and comes up with a bearing or a radial from the station. You may think that a VOR is for an instrument approach, which is true, but a VOR is something that you use in VFR flights, and you will be tested on it. The three main flight controls are aileron, rudder, and elevator. This is all in Chapter 6 of your PHAK, your Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge. A temporary pilot certificate is valid for 120 days. Once you get your pilot certificate, you'll get a temporary. I got one recently with my AGI. The FAA takes a few weeks to process, so I won't probably get my little plastic card in the mail for a month. I call it a little plastic card, but this is, the card is your permanent certificates. If you're an airline pilot and you get a new type rating, the post office loses your permanent certificate. You won't be legal to fly if that 120 days passes. So it would be on you to get a new temporary certificate with your FSDO. Single engine or multi-engine are types of airplane class ratings. So you need to know the difference between categories and classes. There are 7 categories of aircraft, and then each of those can be divided into 2 or more classes. If you want to read up on this, there's lots of FAA materials you can reference, or just look at class ratings on Wikipedia. The D in the DECIDE checklist stands for detect. The DECIDE model is something that pilots can use to make decisions. It basically uses the skills you have learned from flying and helps you apply them. And it also helps you recognize your options. If you're flying your 172 along and you lose your engine, it may seem like you have no options. You're going to crash because the airplane is going to fall out of the sky. But you actually have a lot of options. You could land on the freeway. You could land on the frontage road. You could land on a 3,000-foot private airport that's right below you. In the lost engine scenario, D is detect that a change has occurred. In this case, that your engine has stopped working. You would also start with troubleshooting it. If there's something simple that you're able to restart it, you would start with that. Sometimes you have a lot of time to think about this, or if your engine starts sputtering when you're 100 feet in the air, you have a lot less time. So it's important to think about those before you fly and then check in if there's an emergency. The 3P model refers to the continuous loop of perceiving, processing, and performing. If you're perceiving, processing, and performing, you're not panicking. You're using the skills you have to reach the best outcome and constantly reevaluating if you need to rethink your choices and options. The primary purpose of flaps to permit a slower airspeed and steeper angle of descent during a landing approach. One thing I think about when I throw flaps in is, do I need to be slower? Putting in flaps should check the airspeed, one, to make sure you're in that flap range, but also to verify that you need to keep slowing down. If you're really slow, you may put flaps in just to end up putting in power. Class A airspace goes from 18,000 feet MSL up to and including flight level 600. So regarding airspace, read up on chapter 15 of the PHAC if this is something you're not familiar with. If you have that upside down wedding cake visual, Class A airspace is the huge space at the very top. Class D airspace generally goes from the surface to 2,500 feet above the airport elevation. Again, chapter 15 in the PHAC, review airspace if you're not familiar with this. The T in TFR stands for temporary flight restriction. We see these often with presidential movements, and they're called a VIP TFR. If the president is coming into Los Angeles, there will be a TFR at LAX. Just an example.